So this is the topic for Module 1. So we'll discuss philosophical perspective of the self. People say that the secret to success is to know yourself. Do you agree? Have you ever asked yourself the question, do I really know myself? Suppose that I'll ask you to tell something about yourself. Some of you may found this statement quite easy, but surely many of you found it tough to look for the finest words to describe yourself. Some of you may have encountered instances wherein you underestimate yourself because you are afraid to get embarrassed, or you have absolutely no idea of what you are capable of doing. Why do you think this happens? The answer is simple, because you do not truly know yourself. So according to Anaxagoras, the greatest ignorance is the ignorance of oneself. Okay, next. So indeed, it is necessary to know yourself. But how do you go about it? So this lesson will explore the philosophies or different philosophies about the self, which break into several key theories about human existence that have been a heated debate throughout history and are still being argued about up until now. In an effort to answer the countless inquiries about the self, the greatest thinkers, known as the philosophers, have immersed themselves in search for knowledge about the nature of being human. Questions like, why does it mean to be a person? Or, who am I? Do I really matter? Or, how do I know that I will continue to be me in the future? These philosophers engage themselves to address these matters of existence to help us understand the different views about the self. It is to believe that our existence is a journey of lifelong journey of knowing oneself. If we do not know what we want to do, it will lead us to nowhere. So it is easier, or it is imperative for us to understand what we want, our aspirations in lives, our goals, our strengths and limitations, in order for us to achieve happiness, the true meaning of happiness. Before we proceed to the philosophical perspective of Socrates, let's define first what is philosophy. So it is often called the mother of all disciplines because many of fields in science originated from philosophy. Even psychology was originally um, derived from the teachings of Socrates then. And then eventually, because of some developments or parang mga tao or mga other people that will focus on the field of psychology, they decided to uh, separate psychology in the field of philosophy. So same with other fields of science. So most of them originated from philosophy. Kasi talagang nauna yung mga philosophers na examine or intindihin yung existence ng tao. Based on the etymological definition, philosophy derived from the Greek word philosophia, which means love of wisdom. Generally, we can define philosophy as the study of general and fundamental questions about existence, knowledge, values, reasons, mind, and language. The term itself was coined by Pythagoras. Usually, for the philosophical methods, philosophers used questioning, critical discussions, rational argument. There is a classical philosophical question proposed by different philosophers. They ask the question, is it possible to know anything? If yes, can we prove it? So that is one of the classical philosophical questions under philosophy. Ayan. So I know that you're familiar with the faces of three Greek philosophers. Start with Socrates, then his student Plato, and the student of Plato, which is Aristotle. So we'll elaborate the teachings and the perspective of the self based on these Greek philosophers. So how do we define the self or the philosophy of the self? Accordingly, the philosophy of the self is the study of many conditions of identity that make one subject of experience distinct from other experiences. The components or the aspects of ourself is different from other people. So all of us are unique in our own little ways. Our self is combination of the traits that we have inherited from our parents, that is part of nature, and the different environmental factors that influence the development of the self. So lahat yan, since iba-iba yung mga na-experience natin, so most likely iba rin ang pag-develop ng sariling identity o ng mismong sarili natin. So we're talking about different aspects of the self. Even identical twins, they have different components of themselves. So first philosopher, we have Socrates. So he was one of the greatest and most famous Greek philosophers. He was the first moral philosopher and one of the founders of Western philosophy. He was famous from the line, "Unexamined life is not worth living." So before we discuss the perspective of Socrates about the development of the self, I'll just give you a background about the story of Socrates. Though he made major contributions in Western philosophy, he didn't write down any of his work and teachings. So he was known from the writings of his prized student Plato. Socrates was often in the position of an examiner or a questionnaire. So he constantly looks for imperfections in the ideas of others, which is actually the heart of his philosophy. Socrates knows that he knows nothing. Jon Snow, char, hindi. He knows nothing. More importantly, he knows that he knows nothing, while everyone else is under the pretense that they know something. So that is very dangerous. That's why yung mga, although he had some followers din, naging according dun sa leader ng mga time na yon, dangerous na tao ito si Socrates. So according to Socrates, the highest form of human excellence is to question oneself and others. So in truth, Socrates is simply establishing a higher standard of truth, which must be logically consistent and not contradicting itself. So this is Socrates' a dangerous idea. So instead of being satisfied with an answer that sounds pretty good, Socrates asserts that one should examine more closely the things we call true, considering that there are vast concepts that are not easily defined. To Socrates, man has to look at himself to understand his long-standing mission, which is to know yourself. For him, an examined life is not worth living. Basically, the most horrible thing that can happen to anybody is to live but die inside. It seems like, parang it's like you are an empty shell. So parang you don't know what you want to do in life, na parang you just go with the flow. So yun daw ang pinaka parang most horrible thing na pwede mangyari sa isang tao. Yung di mo alam kung ano yung purpose mo in life. So dahil nga dun sa ganong philosophy na we have to question everything, parang we have to question all the information that will be fed to us. Kaya according dun sa time na yon ng mga Athenian city-state, they considered him as dangerous, na parang somehow daw he corrupted the minds of the youth. Kaya siya na persecute siya nung time na yon. So pinatay parang siya na tawag ito, he found guilty din, tapos na-sentence siya to die and to drink a poison, yung hemlock poison. Likewise, he stated that an individual's choice is motivated by the desire for happiness, but the right choices to achieve happiness can only be made when we truly knows himself. Knowing thyself means we have this full power of reason or human self, or we know who we are, who we should be, and who will become. So we know our strengths, our limitations, our potentialities. Now we learn from our experiences na because of the teachings that we encountered or obtained from our experiences, we able to make right choices. And because of the right choices that we made, we will attain a true meaning of happiness. He also believed that an individual's personhood is composed of the body and the soul. He considered the self is part of the soul, which is the essence of the self. The soul for him is immortal. For this reason, he insisted that death is not the end of existence. Rather, it is simply the separation of the soul from the body. And one way to or method to understand or to know the self is through the use of introspection, also known as self-analysis, or a method carefully examining one's thoughts and emotions to gain self-knowledge. Okay, next. Ayan. So since he believed that our self composed of body and soul, he suggested that there are two dichotomous realms. We have the physical realm and ideal realm. Our self or our body is part of the physical realm, which is changeable, transient, and imperfect. Whereas our soul is part of the ideal realm, which is unchanging, eternal, and immortal. So sabi nga niya na yung self daw natin composed of body and soul. He considered the soul as immortal, which is part of the ideal self. And our main goal is to achieve the ideal realm. Kaya nga sabi niya, 'di ba, yung death daw is not really the end of existence, but the beginning of another dimension, or parang existence din. Parang ano siya, simply separation of the soul from the body. Kaya noong time na pinainom sa kanya yung hemlock poison, talagang hindi siya nagkatubili na inumin yun. So there are other statements given by Socrates, like there is only one good knowledge and one evil ignorance. So according to him, having a good life will lead to happiness, and ignorance of what is good is the culprit to wicked life, and it will lead to unhappiness. So he was not contented with what he has, will not be contented with what he would like to have. True wisdom comes to each of us when we realize how little we understand about life, ourselves, and the world around us. The easiest and noblest way is not to be crushing others, but to be improving yourself. Now, we have to consider ourselves as our greatest competitor. So instead of competing with others, why not competing with ourselves? Na parang ano siya, mas it will help us to become more motivated rather than to seek competition to others. Kasi magkakaroon na tayo ng frustration Kasi we tend to compare our capabilities to other people, na bakit siya ay mas magaling sa ganito, bakit ako ay hindi ko kaya. So parang we have to compete with ourselves. My friend, care for your psyche, know thyself, for once we know ourselves, we may learn how to care for ourselves. The only true wisdom is in knowing you know nothing. Ayan, sa yung sinasabi ko sa inyo kanina, the very dangerous idea or philosophy according to the city-state of Athens. The reason why he was sentenced to die drinking hemlock poison. Na parang we have to question everything, na lahat na ibibigay sa atin, i-check natin kung talagang authentic, or yung information na yun ay talagang totoo. Kahit yun sa religion, talagang kino-question din niya kasi maraming mga oppositions pagdating sa religion Kaya nga sinasabi rin na siya ay antichrist dahil dun sa ganong paniniwala.